Imagine for a moment opening your eyes to an unfamiliar ceiling. The fabric of your memory seems to have been torn, leaving only frayed edges, a sensation of confusion, a rush of adrenaline, and the overwhelming question, how did I get here? For most of us, waking up in a strange place is a scenario reserved for nightmares or mystery novels. But for some, it becomes a bewildering reality. Let's step into the true stories of three ordinary people who experienced the extraordinary, waking up in places they'd never seen before, with no recollection of how they arrived. Our first story follows Hannah, a 28-year-old nurse from the suburbs of Manchester. Her day had been unremarkable: an early shift, a cup of tea before bed, and her usual routine of reading a few pages from her favorite novel. But when Hannah opened her eyes that morning, she was not in her cozy bedroom. Instead, she found herself lying on a damp wooden bench, the scent of salt and seaweed filling the air. Confusion washed over her as she sat up, the gray light of dawn revealing a rocky beach stretching out in front of her. The sea was close, waves lapping at her feet. She looked down to find she was still wearing her pajamas, her bare feet sticky with sand. Panic set in as she scanned the horizon, a deserted stretch of coastline, gulls wheeling overhead, and not a soul in sight. Hannah's heart pounded. She dug through her memories, desperate to recall the previous night, but her last clear thought was of drifting off to sleep in her own bed. In the distance, she spotted a weather-beaten sign indicating the name of the beach, one she'd never visited, nearly 30 miles from her home. How had she arrived here? Her phone was nowhere to be found. As she wandered along the shore, she finally stumbled upon a fisherman who was as startled to see her as she was relieved to find him. The authorities were called and a medical team arrived to assess her. Days of investigation followed, but no evidence pointed to abduction or foul play. Hannah's case was eventually classified as a rare episode of dissociative fugue, a psychological state sometimes triggered by stress or trauma, in which a person temporarily loses access to their identity and memories, sometimes traveling far from home. To this day, Hannah has no memory of the journey that brought her to that lonely beach, but she remembers the feeling of waking up in a world that felt entirely new. Our next story brings us to the bustling streets of Tokyo, where Akira, a 42-year-old salaryman, experienced something that would reshape his understanding of reality. Akira's life was structured: long hours at the office, evenings spent with his family, and a reliable train commute. He often joked that he could navigate his route in his sleep. One rainy night, after a late meeting, he boarded his usual train and closed his eyes, lulled by the rhythmic clatter of the tracks. But when Akira awoke, he was not in his familiar neighborhood station. Instead, he was seated on a wooden bench in a dimly lit temple. Incense lingered in the air, and the soft sound of chanting echoed from an inner chamber. His briefcase sat beside him, unopened. Dazed, Akira checked his watch. Nearly 2 a.m. He wandered outside and found himself in a rural village, miles from the city center, with no memory of disembarking from the train or arriving at the temple. A kind monk, noticing Akira's distress, offered him tea and a place to sit. Over the next hour, Akira pieced together what little he knew. His phone's GPS history showed a series of stops and transfers, none of which he recalled making. The monks assured him that he had arrived at the temple alone, quietly taking a seat as if in deep contemplation. Akira's family, frantic with worry, had already contacted the police. His disappearance was explained as a probable case of sleepwalking, but Akira had never experienced such episodes before. For weeks after, he struggled with insomnia, haunted by the sensation of being adrift in his own life. Yet, as time passed, he came to view the experience as a turning point, a reminder that even in the most structured existence, life can deliver the unexpected, and sometimes the mind takes us on journeys we cannot explain. The third story belongs to Maria, a 35-year-old artist living in Lisbon. Maria cherished the familiar, the gentle hum of her apartment building, the smell of baking bread from the bakery below, the sunlit corners of her favorite cafe. One afternoon, feeling unusually tired, she lay down for a nap on her couch. The next thing she knew, she was waking up on a hospital bed, fluorescent lights glaring overhead. Startled, Maria sat up and immediately felt a dull ache in her head. A nurse entered, speaking softly in a language she didn't recognize. When Maria replied in Portuguese, the nurse looked confused, then left to find someone who could translate. It was only then that Maria learned the extraordinary truth. She was in a small hospital in southern France, hundreds of kilometers from her home. Maria's belongings were missing, save for the clothes she wore when she lay down to nap. Hospital records indicated she had been found wandering in a local park, disoriented and unable to communicate. The days that followed were a blur of medical tests, interviews, and attempts to piece together the missing hours. Eventually, authorities surmised that Maria had suffered a complex seizure, which can, in rare cases, lead to transient global amnesia, a sudden temporary episode of memory loss. After returning home to Lisbon, Maria's memory never fully recovered the lost time. She often wonders what happened during those mysterious hours, and how she managed to cross an international border without any identification or language skills. The experience, however unsettling, inspired a new series of paintings, abstract landscapes that evoke the feeling of waking up in a place both foreign and strangely familiar. Each of these stories, unique in their details, share a common thread: a sudden plunge into the unknown, a scramble to make sense of a new reality, and the enduring mystery of the mind's hidden pathways. Waking up in a strange place is more than an unsettling event. It is a challenge to our sense of self, a reminder of how fragile and extraordinary consciousness can be. For Hannah, Akira, and Maria, the experience left a permanent imprint, a story that defies easy explanation, and a renewed appreciation for the simple act of waking up where you expect to be. Their stories remind us that sometimes the most remarkable journeys are the ones we never intended to take. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe for more stories.